Where did life come from? Or more importantly, where did the diverse nature of life come from? Today we'll be talking about one of the most fascinating questions in evolutionary biology. What sparked the Cambrian explosion? The Cambrian explosion was a remarkable event that occurred about 540 million years ago, when the oceans suddenly filled with an astonishing diversity of animals. Before that, life was mostly simple and stationary, consisting of microbes and soft-bodied creatures that lived on the sea floor. But in a relatively short span of time, animals evolved complex body plans, skeletons, eyes, muscles, nervous systems, and predatory behaviors that shaped the course of life on Earth. But what caused this evolutionary burst? How did animals go from being simple and sluggish to diverse and dynamic? And what can we learn from this ancient revolution about the origins and future of life? In this episode, we will explore some of the latest clues and theories that scientists have gathered from fossils, rocks, and modern animals to shed light on this mysterious period in Earth's history. We'll also hear from some experts in the field who share insights and opinions on this fascinating topic. So stay tuned as we unravel the mystery of the Cambrian explosion. I'm your host, MrEarthGuy, and this is the Earth SciShow. The first thing we need to understand is what the world was like before the Cambrian explosion. The period before the Cambrian is called the Ediacaran, and it lasted from 635 to 541 million years ago. During this time, the oceans were very different from today. They had much less oxygen, which limited the types of life that could survive there. Most animals were soft-bodied and immobile, living in a microbial mat that covered the sea floor. Some of them looked like quilted pillows or fronds, and they probably absorbed nutrients through their skin. They had no eyes, mouths, limbs, or shells, and they had no predators to worry about. One of the places where we can find fossils of these Ediacaran animals is in Namibia, where there are ancient reefs built by cyanobacteria. These reefs are like monuments of a faded empire, showing us a glimpse of the truly alien world. But this world was about to change dramatically. One of the main factors that may have triggered the Cambrian explosion is oxygen. Oxygen is essential for animals because it allows them to break down food and release energy more efficiently than most other ways. Oxygen enables animals to grow larger, move faster, and develop more complex features like muscles, nerves, and teeth. But how much oxygen was there in the oceans before and during the Cambrian explosion? And how did it affect animal evolution? This is a hotly debated question among scientists, who use various methods to measure oxygen levels in ancient rocks and sediments. Some studies suggest that oxygen levels rose sharply at the start of the Cambrian, reaching their near-modern levels in some parts of the ocean. This would have provided a boost for animal diversification and innovation. But other studies challenge this view, arguing that oxygen levels did not change much across the Ediacaran-Cambrian boundary. They suggest that oxygen was already high enough to support simple animals for hundreds of millions of years before they actually appeared, and they propose that other factors such as ecological interactions or genetic changes played a bigger role in driving animal evolution. So who is right, and how can we resolve this controversy? To answer these questions, we need to look at more than just oxygen levels. We also need to look at how animals responded to their environment and each other. One of the most important changes that occurred during the Cambrian explosion was the emergence of predators. Predators are animals that hunt and eat other animals rather than feeding on microbes or plants. Predators introduce a new level of complexity and competition in the ecosystem, forcing prey animals to evolve defenses or escape strategies. But when did these predators first appear, and how did they affect their prey? Some clues come from fossils of the Ediacaran animals that show signs of predation or defense. For example, some fossils of Cloudina, a cone-shaped creature that lived on microbial reefs in Namibia, have holes in their shells that may have been made by attackers that bored through them. Other fossils of Cambrian, a slug-like animal that may have been related to mollusks, have scratch marks on their backs that could have been caused by predators that scraped them off the seafloor. These fossils suggest that predation was already happening in the Ediacaran, but it was probably not very common or intense. Most Ediacaran animals were still slow and soft, and they had a few ways to protect themselves or fight back. But this changed dramatically in the Cambrian, when predators became more diverse and powerful. Some of the most powerful Cambrian predators are the anomalocarids. These were large and agile creatures with segmented bodies, jointed appendages, and toothed mouthparts. They could swim fast and attack prey with their powerful jaws. They were the top predators of their time, and they probably fed on trilobites, which were hard-shelled arthropods that dominated the Cambrian seas. The rise in predators like these had a profound impact on their prey. They forced them to evolve new adaptations to survive, such as shells, spines, armor plates, or camouflage. They also drove them to explore new habitats and niches, such as burrowing into sediment or swimming in the water column. These adaptations increased the diversity and complexity of animal life, creating a feedback loop that accelerated evolution. But predators were not the only source of pressure for prey animals. They also had to deal with competitors for food and space, and they had to cope with environmental changes, such as fluctuations in temperature, salinity, and sea level. So how did these animals adapt to these challenges, and what kind of innovations did they come up with? To answer these questions, we need to look at some of the most remarkable examples of animals that evolved during the Cambrian. One of the most striking examples of animal evolution in the Cambrian is the origin of eyes. Eyes are complex organs that allow animals to sense light and form images of their surroundings. Eyes are essential for many aspects of animal behavior, such as finding food, avoiding predators, or communicating with mates. But when did eyes first evolve, and how did they influence animal evolution? Some clues come from fossils of trilobites, which are among the earliest animals to evolve eyes. Trilobites had compound eyes, which are made of small units called ommatidia that each detect parts of the visual field. Compound eyes are good for detecting movement and contrast, but not for forming sharp images. Trilobite eyes varied greatly in size, shape, and the number of ommatidia. Some trilobites had large eyes that covered most of their head, while others had small eyes that were barely visible. Some trilobites had hundreds or thousands of ommatidia, while others had only a few or none at all. Some trilobites had eyes on stalks that can move around, while others had eyes that were fixed on their heads. These variations reflect different adaptations to different environments and lifestyles. For example, trilobites that lived in deep or murky waters had smaller or fewer eyes than those that lived in shallow or clear waters. Trilobites that were active hunters or scavengers had larger or more complex eyes than those that were filter feeders or grazers. And trilobites that needed to avoid predators or communicate with mates had more flexible eyes or expressive eyes than those that did not. Trilobite eyes show us how animals evolved different solutions to similar problems. They also show us how eyes influenced animal behavior and interactions. But trilobites were not the only animals to have eyes in the Cambrian. Other animals evolved different types of eyes, such as simple eye spots that could only detect light or dark, or camera eyes that could form focused images by using a lens and retina. Camera eyes are found in vertebrates and some mollusks, such as squids and octopuses. The evolution of eyes in different animal groups is an example of convergent evolution, which is when unrelated organisms evolve similar features independently because they face similar challenges or opportunities. The evolution of eyes also had a major impact on animal evolution as a whole. It increased the speed and complexity of animal interactions, creating an arms race between predators and prey. It also enabled animals to explore new habitats and niches such as the open ocean or the land. Eyes are one of the most remarkable inventions of nature, and they have shaped the course of life on Earth ever since. So what can we conclude from this episode? We learned that the Cambrian explosion was a remarkable event that transformed life on Earth from simple and stationary to diverse and dynamic. We explored some of the possible causes and consequences of this event, such as oxygen levels, predation, and ecological interactions. We also looked at some of the most amazing examples of animal evolution in the Cambrian, such as eyes, shells, and skeletons. But we also realized that there are still many unanswered questions and debates about the Cambrian explosions. How did animals acquire complex body plans and nervous systems? How did they relate to each other genetically and phylogenetically? And how did they cope with the environmental changes and mass extinctions? These are some great questions that scientists are still trying to answer to this day. Using new methods and technologies to study fossils, rocks, and living animals, they will hopefully come up with an answer soon. The Cambrian explosion is not only a historical event, but also a source of inspiration and discovery for modern science. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about the Cambrian explosion or all things geology, make sure you hit that follow and notification icon. Your support is much appreciated and it keeps this channel going. Thank you for listening to Earth SciShow, the podcast that dives into the latest and greatest discoveries in subsurface geology. I am your host, MrEarthGuy, and remember, stay curious.